The winter wind scraped across the stone monastery, and every breath froze in the dark. Inside a cell barely large enough for a bed and a prayer, the cold waited, thick, patient, ready to steal heat from anything alive. This was not a room for comfort. It was a room meant to break a man. Stone walls surrounded the monk on all sides, solid, heavy, merciless. Stone drains heat far faster than wood, pulling warmth away almost instantly. There was no chimney, no vents, no fire, no power. Only silence and -40 cold, the kind that forces a man to bargain with God. And yet, the monks survived. They slept through it, night after night, without smoke, without flame. How? At first glance, the cell looked simple, almost empty, but the walls hid a hard-earned secret. Many were built with 2 layers of stone, a thick outer wall to face the wind, a thinner inner wall inside it, and between them a narrow pocket of trapped air. Just a few inches, but in a frozen world those inches mattered. Stone alone is brutal. Touch it and it leaches warmth straight from your bones. A single solid wall turns a room into an ice cave. The monks realised the real enemy wasn't fire, it was heat loss. So instead of fighting the cold with flames, they fought it with air. They learned this by watching their own cloaks. When 2 garments hung together, the still air between them stayed warmer than the room. If cloth could trap heat, stone could too. So they designed their cells carefully. Thick stone outside, thin stone inside, and air locked between them to slow the cold's advance. That trapped air softened the night. It slowed heat loss, held radiant warmth longer, and created a small pocket of survivable space, just enough for one man to endure the vigil hours until dawn. Modern winter jackets work the same way. They don't keep you warm because of fabric alone, but because of the still air trapped inside. The monks discovered this principle 1,000 years early. They treated cold like an enemy, and beat it by giving air a place to stand. But this was only their first line of defence. When the monks lay down, the stone cell remained a test of endurance. The floor pulled heat like a hungry beast. Anyone lying flat would lose more than half their body warmth before midnight. So the monks built their own microclimate, layer by layer. Their beds started with simple wooden slats. Just wood, nothing fancy. Even that was warmer than stone. On top went a thick mattress of coarse straw, packed tight enough to trap a 5 to 8 centimetre pocket of still air. A hidden layer of warmth. That alone slowed the sharpest heat loss, which always came around 3 in the morning. Then came wool, dense, earthy, long-lasting, followed by a linen shroud and another wool cloak over the legs. Wood, straw, wool, cloth, more wool. Each layer didn't generate heat, but trapped the faint warmth the human body gave off. Stacked correctly, a freezing stone cell became survivable. Not comfortable, but enough to endure. The payoff was immediate. Warm pockets under the spine, stable heat around the chest, a deeper, uninterrupted sleep. This principle still outperforms electric heaters during a blackout. It doesn't rely on power, it relies on physics. Modern sleeping bags work the same way. All warmth comes from trapped air. The monks had mastered it 1,000 years ago, long before vents or chimneys. And yet, this was only the start of their nightly battle. Cold in a monastery didn't just settle, it hunted. Cloister winds sliced under stone arches, drafts sharp enough to pierce wool. An open bed was an invitation to freeze. So the monks carved the very walls around their sleep. They created small bed alcoves, 2 or 3 feet deep, tiny hollows just large enough for one man and his breath. The logic was simple, brilliant. In a vast stone room, a body must heat the whole space. At -40, that was a losing fight. Shrink the space and the rules change. 3 stone walls, a low ceiling, a wool curtain pulled across the front. Suddenly, the wind vanished, the cold slowed, and the warmth of a single body began to matter. Even one monk could heat that tiny alcove faster than the rest of the cell could drain it. It became a microclimate, a room within a room. The stone still had brutal thermal mass, but here it worked for them, holding bits of radiant heat instead of swallowing it whole. Many monks said it was the only place where the frost-bitten silence of the night couldn't reach them. No drafts clawing at their necks. Warmth that lingered through the vigil hours. Sleep deep enough to carry them safely through the dark. Modern survivalists follow the same principle when building sleeping pods in emergency shelters. Smaller space, less air to heat, more life preserved. Sometimes the tiniest room is the safest. For the monks, this was only the start of their battle against the cold. In a stone cell, the cold strikes first where a man is most vulnerable: the neck, the ears, the scalp. Without a chimney, without fire, that loss could be fatal. 30 to 40% of body heat escapes through the head and neck. The solution was simple: a wool cowl. Thick, heavy, woven tight like a promise. Every monk had one. By day it was part of their vigil attire, by night it became survival gear. Pulled down over the ears, jawline and neck, sometimes layered with a thin linen shroud underneath, it trapped a pocket of still air. Wool above, linen below, warmth locked in. The effect was immediate: rapid heat, deep heat. Heat that settles in the chest and stops shivering before it starts. In a room built to test a man, that simple hood could mean the difference between waking steady or waking shaking. Old, simple, yet more effective than many modern sleep hoods, it held heat where the body loses it fastest. The payoff mattered most around 3 in the morning, when heat loss peaks and the frostbitten silence presses hardest. With their cowls, the monks kept their core temperature stable, surviving until dawn. The principle hasn't changed. Nordic soldiers and Arctic rescue teams still rely on the same trick: cover the head, protect the neck, save the body. A simple hood, 1,000-year-old solution. And yet, this was only one part of their quiet war. Fire inside a stone cell wasn't comfort, it was danger. One spark could cling to the ceiling, thicken the air, and choke a sleeping monk. So the monks stopped trying to make heat inside the room and brought it in from outside instead. They discovered that large, dense kitchen stones could store warmth for hours. Long after the embers died, the stones remained hot, a slow, steady glow of radiant heat. In a room where frostbitten silence pressed in from every corner, every glowing stone made the difference between life and a frozen night. Here's how they did it. Kitchen monks heated fist or melon-sized stones near the cooking hearth. Once hot, they wrapped them in thick, coarse wool, just enough to carry without burning, and carried them down the icy hallways, past the cloister winds, into the sleeping cells.
Each stone was tucked under a bench or slid beside a straw mattress, letting its heat rise slowly. For a room with no vents or power, the effect was almost miraculous. Gentle, steady warmth, clean air, no smoke, a pocket of heat to bridge the dead hours before dawn. This was one of Europe's oldest no-fire heating methods, used in mountain villages centuries before chimneys existed. Modern Scandinavians still follow the same principle with soapstone heaters, large blocks that hold heat for hours. The monk's version was smaller, simpler, but enough to keep a man alive in a room built to test him. A warm stone, a frozen night, and the knowledge that survival sometimes begins outside the fire. In a monastery, Warmth wasn't just comfort, it was rhythm, a shared pulse. Prayer, sleep, prayer again. The monks moved through the cold nights like one disciplined body, each cell a piece of the pattern. That rhythm became a weapon. Open one door at the wrong hour, and the hallway's heat spilled out, letting the cold sweep in like a blade. They discovered the power of synchronized sleep. When every monk lay down at the same time, doors stayed closed, halls remained still, and heat lingered. Each room radiated warmth into the stone around it, and the stones held it just long enough for the next cycle, a shared microclimate across dozens of tiny rooms. They kept it precise. Sleep, rise for vigil, return at the exact same minute. Doors stayed closed during the deadest, coldest hours. No wandering, no pacing, no drafts slipping under doors. A simple rule: move together, rest together, endure together. The payoff was quiet but vital. Less warm air lost. No shock when stepping into the hallway. No sudden chill to drop a man's core temperature before morning prayers. Discipline, but also survival. Modern Arctic mining cabins still use the same idea: synchronized heat schedules. One person's midnight door swing can chill an entire bunkhouse. The monks understood this 1,000 years ago. Shared rhythm, shared warmth, and sometimes the strongest insulation is each other. By the time the cloister wind crawls under the stone arches, the monks are already gathering for their final prayer. Their breath turns to mist. Their robes hang heavy like linen shrouds. In a cell built to test a man, warmth had to come from within.
They understood this long before science named it. A body running on thin soup alone cannot survive a -40 night in a stone box with no chimney, no vents, no power. By 3 a.m, that internal fire would sputter, just when the cold bites through a cowl and steals whatever warmth remains. But the monks discovered something simple. Fat burns slow and steady. Unlike carbohydrates, it releases long, radiant heat that doesn't spike and crash. Perfect for the peak of nighttime heat loss. So before the last vigil hours, they ate differently. Thick oat porridge, butter, animal fat reserved for winter's harshest stretch. Not indulgence, fuel. They ate just before the final prayer, letting the warmth rise from chest to hands, building a small internal fire that stone walls could not snuff out. The payoff was immediate. Warmer cores, deeper sleep, no freezing shock at 3 a.m, heat that kept them safer through the night. Reflection came naturally. Sometimes warmth doesn't come from walls, it begins with the man himself. Modern survivalists call it the heat before sleep meal. The monks had no name, they just knew it kept them alive. In a world where one bad night could mean frostbite, or worse, that quiet wisdom mattered more than any chimney. A candle flickers low, trembling against the stone. The monk's breath drifts into the dark like smoke. Wool layers cling to their bodies, just as they did 1,000 winters ago. It reminds us of something simple. Electricity, gas, vents and thermostats can fail, but the principles these men lived by remain. They didn't fight winter. They learned its rhythm and worked with it. That's why they survived nights that would break most of us.